Hey everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Community. I'm here in New York, and we've rented the studio. We've had such a great day. I interviewed two powerhouses. I have another powerhouse after, and Stacy was supposed to be with me, and unfortunately her flight got canceled, so I have some solo time. And so I want to talk about something that comes up all the time, where people ask me all these questions, and I always feel like I need to answer this whenever anyone asks, like, do I need to have a podcast? Should I have a podcast? I'm always like, yes, I have a podcast. But it's never for the reason that people think. And so I wanted to talk about why I think podcasting is the greatest networking hack and one of the coolest things you can do in your business. And listen, I'm in a studio today in this beautiful studio in New York. I'm having the best time, but it doesn't have to be this high tech. It can be some of the best mentors I have who have podcasts. They use little Amazon mics. They plug into their phone. They record in the car. They record with a cough. They do whatever. And why I think that's so important to know is because it's so easy for us to see like all of these people who have all of these amazing, communities, and they have these amazing big podcasts. And I look at like, Alex Earl or even Alex Hormozy or all of these like super successful podcasts, and they're always renting these beautiful studios like this, or, they're always doing different things. And it's easy to have, be comparing, to be jealous or be envious of them and be like, well, if I'm not going to do it like that, I'm not going to do it. But it's really just about getting started. And so even when I wanted to start my podcast, the reason we did it was because I wanted to start having conversations with people about what building community looked like in their business. It was starting to become something that I wanted to talk about more and more. I was really curious about how other people were doing it. I felt like I had a unique strategy to building our community that built our business so quickly. And I really wanted to follow up with people and see like what people were doing to build their community and ultimately, grow their businesses. And I always want to say, like, when I say community, I don't mean following. I don't mean, how are you growing your following on Instagram? We can help you with that in the Social Business Club. But really what I mean is actually growing the community of people who, are your supporters, are your fans, are the people who you get to connect with every day. And I love growing that part of my business. And that's been such a big part of really growing the show. And so when I started this, I actually went to our team. We were producing one other podcast. And I went to my team and I was like, I want to launch a podcast. It was June of 2022. And I was like, I really want to launch a podcast. And luckily I've got a lot of in-house support, and the team was able to turn it around in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I was able to launch a podcast. And you know me, I'm a messy action girly, right? Like I take messy action on everything that I do. That's been, I think, a huge part of why we've been like successful in what we've been doing is because I love to take fast action. Maria loves to make a plan. So we're the perfect pairing. And really why I wanted to do it was I just wanted to have conversations. And it also scratched another itch I had, which was I needed content. I was talking about community a lot, or I wanted to talk about community more. And I actually wanted content to be able to talk about it in a way that made sense. So fast forward, it's July 2022. I invite kind of on some of my close friends and I start running my podcast. So, the first few episodes, it didn't have as many downloads as they definitely do now, but it took time to grow. And I was excited at every milestone. I was excited for my first episode that hit 30, my first episode that hit 50, my first episode that I hit 100, my first episode that's about to hit 500, whatever. Like I'm always really excited for every milestone. And that's really important for you to keep in mind when growing a podcast is that you have to maintain the momentum of it because it has to feel like a labor of love. The reason for that is podcasts are kind of hard to monetize at the beginning. I'm not going to lie to you. You're not, unless you've got a pretty significant audience already and you're getting sponsorships or brand deals in another way, you're probably not going to get brand deals right off the hop. But what you can use this podcast for is monetization in other ways, right? So you can monetize your own programs. You can monetize, maybe you have an offering that you love. You can monetize that. You can monetize your membership. It's a great opportunity for you to talk about all the things you've got going on. And you can monetize in those ways. But monetizing in like your traditional way where you're probably thinking about it, where, a sponsor comes on right now in mid-roll and they say, hey, you want to buy, I always think of the underwear brand that is always on Dax Shepard's podcast, right? Like it's really not that simple and really dependent on download numbers. So what I would really focus on is making your podcast a labor of love so that you love showing up for it. You love having the conversations. You love being in community with your listeners. So I always say if I had a podcast, which I do, and no one ever listened to it again, I would still do it. And the reason is I think it is the number one networking hack in growing your business. It's so amazing of a great way to be able to talk to people. And it is so amazing and fabulous to be able to talk to people about your niche. And you get opportunities to talk to people that you normally wouldn't be able to talk to because you have a podcast. So, for example, everyone asks me about when I started my podcast. I actually just did it with a bunch of friends. I asked, my friends, I didn't actually care about audience sizes. And if I was to redo that, I probably would have gotten some of my mentors to be my first few guests. So get some people who I know are going to share it, who have, similar audience to me. Then that's maybe what I would have done now. But at the time, I used my friends, and that was a great way for me to actually practice interviewing people, practice asking questions, practice the art of making people feel like they're part of what you're doing, even if they don't have the same relationships that you do. So I really used it as an opportunity to practice over and over again, like what it meant to build community online. And that was originally what the podcast was about. It was about building community online. And now it's just about community more broadly. But I wanted it to be about showing people that it could be messy and you could just have conversations. And I wanted to ask people, like, how were they building community? How were they growing their email lists? How were they meeting people at events and then converting them into clients? Like, how are people using SEO to build community? How are people getting new eyeballs on all these offers? Like, that's what I wanted to talk about over and over again. And I was able to have conversations with people who I probably wouldn't have been able to just like pick their brain for an hour in another way. And I learned so much. Like, I use those almost as like coaching opportunities and where I provide huge value to the audience, but I always am learning as well. So the first thing I'm going to say about using it as a networking hack is that you want to use it to be able to connect with new people. And so it's always great to have your friends on. I like literally all of my friends have been almost on my podcast. If you're a friend and you haven't been on my podcast, hit me up. But I love it to be able to connect with new people. I don't do a lot of cold pitching where I'm like, oh, like I'm looking for you to come on my podcast. Like, I think you'd be great. I'm pretty intentional about the fact that I like to have friend energy with my podcast guests. It's very rare that I will interview someone who I haven't had a previous conversation with because I love the conversations to be fun. And that's a big part of my personality. I like things to feel good. Other people, it's not important to them. I've been on podcasts before where I've never met the person. I've been on podcasts before where they don't know anything about me, seemingly. So it's all works. But for me, I really want to have that friend energy. And I've been able to have really good opportunities like that. Then next is really thinking about who are mentors in the space of what you talk about. And, could you ask them for a connection call so that, you can get to know each other a little bit before getting on your podcast? That's a really cool way for you to kind of get eyes on what you're doing and on your business. And if you're looking to connect with these mentors or people who are a little farther ahead than you, it's a great way to get on the map because you're sitting here one-on-one and you're having a conversation that really shows your expertise. It shows who you are. It shows, that you're somebody with a lot of integrity. It shows all of these things. And so when you show all those things, people start to just get to know you and they like you, and you're able to really have those conversations and build relationships. So my podcast episodes where I've had really notable guests that I love have actually brought me closer to my guests, right? Like, I think about having Jacqueline Johnson on or Lori or even Chris, like those were such pivotal moments where I got to have a really nice one-on-one conversation with them. And not that I hadn't had other ones, but it gave me a chance to really dive deep on topics that mattered. And so if you can use those opportunities appropriately, it's a great way for you to get mentors to be one-on-one and also for you to collaborate with. And I would say when you do that, a few little tips, like one, it's in the over-delivering. So I love to give those people clips. I love to, my team, I have some fabulous video and audio editors on our team. I ask always, I'm like, I need a banger reel for that person. Like I need it to look so good. And so we'll put together like a really incredible reel. And why I do that, and it's really in the feature of the guest, because I really want to show them how much I value their time, right? They get so many asks, like the people who I've interviewed and some of the people I'm friends with, like they get so many asks, so that the fact that they're interested in doing this with me is just such an honor. So I don't take that lightly. And so if that's the case, then I really want to over deliver. The other thing is the fortunes and the follow-up. And you've heard me say that before on this podcast, that it's really important that, you're doing the follow-up, you're having conversations with people, and that after you're done your podcast, you don't want the conversation to end there until your next ask, right? You really want your conversation to continue. You want to keep developing that rapport with that person. So I love to send the clips. I love to send a voice note the day after. Sometimes I'll even send a gift. And I'll say, thank you so much for your time. That meant the world to me. I had such a great time chatting with you. Maybe I'll bring a bottle of wine or a gift to the recording. And it's just a really nice way for me to just say thank you so much and go a bit above and beyond. When you do that, it does build that rapport, right? And that's really like why I did my podcast, was to have a bit of a networking conversations with people. And I'm so glad you've enjoyed them and you get to listen to them. And I really want them to be high value. But so much of why I started this was I want to talk about community with cool people. And this seemed like a great way to do it. The other thing too is that when you bring people on your podcast, you'll notice too that it's an opportunity for what I love to call cross-pollination. And cross-pollination is where you are getting in front of another person's audience that maybe doesn't know you yet. And sometimes I feel, and you can DM me if you feel the same way.
It's Maria here, and I'm thrilled today to jump in and tell you a little bit about one of our High Vibe Women Full Day Experience sponsors, and that is Gerda at Moonflower Healing. Gerda has helped me so much on my own healing journey, and I'm thrilled to share a little bit more about her today with you. So at Moonflower Healing, Gerda is passionate about guiding individuals through holistic wellness in Grey/Bruce County, Ontario, and surrounding areas. Drawing from her own healing experiences, she offers powerful modalities like ionic foot detoxes, which are absolutely incredible and mind-blowing, hydrotherapy, energy healing, and so much more. Together, you will work towards feeling energized, rejuvenated, and achieving greater well-being. Soar to new heights on your path to wellness by visiting moonflowerhealing.ca today, and feel free to jump to the show notes. We'll have Gerda's details linked there. I cannot recommend her enough. She is so knowledgeable, so kind, and you will definitely have a fabulous experience if you do choose to work with her.
Sometimes I feel like I've met everybody. There are no more people who need my services. There's no more people for me to sell to. I'm often like, oh, the well is dry for our business. Like, let's shut her down. And that's when my CFO, Stacy, is like, don't do that. But we always feel like, there's no more people. And there are, I don't know the updated number, but is it 8 billion? Like 8 billion people in the world who want probably not 8 billion people who want what you have, probably, but so many people to serve. You probably can't even serve all the people that need your business. So with that in mind, there's just so much opportunity for you to connect with new people. So I love to use these as an opportunity as a little bit of an audience building hack, right? Where if I bring someone on the podcast, just know that I vet a ton of people, a ton of people apply, which is so sweet. And when I bring someone on the podcast, it's because I'm aligned with them. And a big piece of that is about the conversation. I know we're going to have a great conversation. I know it's going to go really well. I know they're going to add huge value. I'm always it's about the value, not the pitch. I really want it to be great. But a big piece of that is I really vet the people who are coming, and I make sure that it makes sense. And they show up. And when I show up, I love to do behind the scenes. I'd love for us to take photos together. And then for me to say hey, I just did this awesome interview with my friend Mike Cool. This is what we talked about. I'm so excited for you to listen to it. She over-delivered. I can't wait for you to see it. And I build hype for them, and I'll post it and they'll repost it. And then you start to get an influx of people who come your way, new podcast listeners. The other day we were in our membership and someone had just joined, and maybe she's listening to it, but she had just joined, and I said, hey, where did you come from? I saw you joined, you bought our retreat. You kind of came out of nowhere. I've never seen you before. And she was like, oh, I listened to you on Chris Harder's podcast and loved your message so much that I binged your podcast. And now I'm here and I'm so excited to be in your world. wow, like that's awesome. That's from a podcast that I was on. I was so like generously invited to be on it. That was awesome and a great opportunity. So that being said, you really want to make sure that, you're cross-pollinating, you're getting into new audiences. You don't want to have the same people over and over again. And I love to make it really clear with people like what my expectations are around them being a podcast guest or me guesting on a podcast is that I'll always promote it. I'll always put it in our newsletter. I will talk about it. I'll repost anything. I'll accept that collab post. I'm happy to do those things because you shared your platform and your time with me. But it's also really amazing for me because I get to be in front of people I probably never would have had the opportunity to be in front of anyway. So I want you to keep thinking about that when you're thinking about a podcast is like, how do you use it as an opportunity to meet more people and get more eyeballs on your business? And that looks like having a few key signature messages. And really, that's important for you to know as well, is that having a few messages that you talk about all the time when you're on other people's podcasts is going to help people finesse why they should listen to your podcast or why they should connect with you. And I will tell you, it is easier to get on other people's podcasts when you have a podcast of your own. People love to share platforms. They really want to make sure that, that there's a reciprocity there, like an energy exchange. But it's really important that if you're going to do that, you're putting in the work to make your platform everything it can be. And so if you're going to be networking and trying to get on other people's shows, having a few messages that you love to talk about and you can talk about with a lot of ease that really position you as an authority. We were talking about this in the Social Business Club the other day where someone brought in a bunch of, topics that they wanted to talk about on a bunch of podcasts. And I was like, I love these topics and they're so great. And the person listened to this, I'm so sorry I'm using you as an example. But I know you'll laugh. But I said that I didn't think that they hit the mark on what she does and how it positions her as an expert. So if she is whatever it is, like I'm a social media expert, I run, we run an agency, we run events. I would say I'm a community building expert. That's like what I love to talk about. I need to have a few key things I can always talk about how to build community. So I have key messaging around like how to build community using social media. I have key messaging around events, around podcasting, around all of these things so that if anyone ever asks me about that, I'm happy to talk about it. And when I pitch myself for podcasts, I really want to pitch myself for podcasts that have aligned audiences because it's not enough. And I will say at the beginning, when you're probably getting on your first few podcasts, you'll kind of go on anything, right? You're going to try anything. You're okay to like really just like, get in front of different audiences. You'll kind of talk about whatever. But as you grow in your business and as I grow in my business and my bandwidth decreases, so it's like kind of like this, I have to be a little bit more choosy about what I'm talking about and where I'm talking about it and like what the podcast look like that I'm on. And it's not even about audience size. It's actually about their audience. Like, is their audience entrepreneurs that'll help me grow my business? Are they entrepreneurs that would ever need our services? Would they join our social business club? Would that be part of what they do or of interest to them? So these are all questions that are so important to ask. And I think that it's often something that people don't ask when they join or go to podcasts is like, how is this going to help grow my business? And I think that's the mistake people make when they don't see ROI on podcasts is because they actually don't know that, podcasts do grow your business, but you have to be a bit intentional with them. You have to be ready to talk about things and you have to be ready to really hone your craft and your message so that people know what it is that you do and how it is that you serve people. That's the most important thing is that you want people to leave that podcast hooked to you so they'd be able to say, okay, I heard Kristina on this podcast and I actually do need social media help and I didn't realize it. So if that's the case, like what do I need to do to get some social media help around here? And they reach out to you and they come right to your website and they fill it out or they join your program or they get on your wait list or they join your retreat or whatever that looks like because they're obsessed with your energy or they want to be part of whatever it is that you're doing. And so I think you really need to think about when you're going on podcasts, like what podcasts are you going on? There's no such thing as bad podcasts, but especially if your bandwidth is not super high, like making sure that there's something that they're going to grow your business or that you're going to add huge value to their audience. So even for example, I was recently on a podcast where someone wanted me to talk, not necessarily about social media, but wanted me to talk about like my path to social media. And the podcast is actually geared towards like people who are in career changes. That person might not need social media or podcasting, but I was just happy to serve. And I think that was a great opportunity. So again, you want to do those things, get on some podcasts and see. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, the first thing I would do is try to get on some podcasts. And there's a few things you can do. Firstly, just like shoot your shot and ask people. I actually, in the club, it's so funny, the person who I gave feedback to, I was like, okay, finesse these messages, and when you're done finessing these messages, come to me and you can come be on my podcast, and we're going to do one of these podcasts live. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, totally, because I like want to see you be successful. And so I would say the first thing you should do is try to get on some podcasts, and they don't have to be huge podcasts, but it's a great way for you to practice, right? You're going to be nervous probably the first few times. Maybe you'll stumble a bit, but it's only like repetition is the only way that you're going to get great at it. And I know for myself, like now when I'm on podcasts, I like literally don't even prep in any way. I just like show up and I'm like, hello, here I am. This is me in my podcast era. That's great. And not everyone's like that. My business partner, Maria, is not. Is not like that. And so if that's the case, you don't have to worry about that. The other thing is you can use something like matchmaker.fm, and matchmaker.fm is awesome. It's like an awesome platform, and it allows you to pair up yourself. You talk about all the things you're doing and you get to pitch yourself for podcasts. That's a great place. There's a Facebook group called like Be a Guest, Need a Guest, and you can post in there being like, hey, this is what I do. I actually got on a bunch of podcasts like that at the beginning, and that helped me grow my podcast because I was going on other people's. My mentor, Chris, says that you should try to be on a podcast tour if you're trying to grow your podcast. So like trying to go on a new one every single day. My friend Laura used Threads to try to find podcast guests to be on, or a podcast to be on as a guest. So she literally posted being like, here are the things that I'm good at, and responded to people who were like, I'm looking for guests, and lots of good things came from that. I've done that as well on Threads if it feels aligned. So there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of potential for you to be able to find podcasts for you to be on. So in summary, you don't need to start a podcast today, but it is an incredible networking hack. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, what I would do is try to get on a bunch of podcasts and see what's aligned. So in summary, if you're interested in starting a podcast, I wouldn't right away go and download Riverside, even though we love the tool, but I would go and I would try to figure out your message. I would get on other podcasts. I would use the networking tools that come with that, right? Getting on other podcasts, connecting with new people, asking how you can pour value into them. We talk about that all the time on the podcast. But what I would say is that if you are looking for a way to supercharge your network in just a few hours a week, podcasting is an amazing way to do it. And of course, my team at The Social Snip is always here to help you with that. But there are lots of things you can do to start your own podcast, and more resources out there to get started. Whether that be Riverside, we love Buzzsprout. There's like so many good things that we love. That you could use to start your own podcast. But really, I think if you are looking to supercharge your network, podcasting is one of the most amazing ways to try. So that's the feedback I've gotten over and over again. Even Stacy, my friend Stacy, who I've mentioned a few times on this podcast, she's always like, I can't thank you enough for, encouraging me to podcast. And I'm always like, yeah, girl, like, because it is so impactful. So let me know if podcasting is one of your big dreams. Maybe it's for 2025. Maybe it's for 2026. I have some people who I know have said 2025 for a few years now, so I look forward to reconnecting with you. But I'm so excited to hear about your podcast dreams. And yeah, go pitch yourself and grow that network. See you soon. Thanks so much for listening to Community with me, Kristina Bartold, and I'm just so excited to continue the conversations. If you're looking to grow your community and learn more about social, join us at thesocialbusinessclub.ca and use the code podcast to get your first month for $1. Share this episode with your friends and on social, or leave a review. It means the world.